Okay, I have this block loaded up now, 50 rounds with powder, and the last thing I like to do before I start putting bullets in them is just tilt the block and look down straight into every case. You know, make sure every one of them has powder in it, make sure every one of them looks the same. You know, I've never had a squib, but it probably isn't very much fun with a Canyon rifle when you're out in the woods and you're hunting, you're taking a long-range shot. So it's cheap insurance just to look down in the cases, make sure nothing's out of place and they all look right. And everything does, so it's time to seat bullets. Okay, so now I'm in the bullet seating stage of this loading process. It's the final stage, other than testing and confirming. Yesterday, my daughter Jessica and I went out and we shot in the Sportsman's Challenge Big Game Shoot. Conditions were tricky to say the least, and we shot between the two of us about 15 more rounds than I thought we would. So now I have 13 total loaded rounds that I own for the Canyon rifle, and that's just not acceptable during spring bear season. I've got this full bin here now full of empties, so I need to make some fulls. So one of the reasons I was waiting till after the shoot to seat the bullets and finish this video is I was at about 250 rounds on the Canyon rifle since the last time I checked throat wear. I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to adjust my seating depth. I've been running Match Kings at about 10 thousandths off the lands with excellent success that way, so I wanted to keep it that way. I did a measurement on the Canyon rifle and it all looked good. It's still running at 3.174 before I get contact to the lands of the Match King. So I'm going to keep my seating depth at 3.164. Okay, so how I check my seating depth in my rifles is with this overall length gauge. This is a Stony Point. It's a pretty old tool. I believe Hornady owns this now. It's called Lock and Load, but it's the same design, same tool. And it's just an aluminum tube that's threaded on one end, and it has a Delrin rod that slides through it. And at the end of the tube, it's got a flat for a caliper blade. Now what you do is you take a modified case. You can buy these over the counter for common cartridges like 260, 308, 7 Rem Mag, whatever. You can buy these for the rifle that are just ready to go. For the oddballs, you're going to have to take a fired case and give it to your gunsmith or send it to somebody to thread it unless you have a lathe handy, and thread the end of it. That end threads onto the end of the tool. Until you hit the stop. Then you take a bullet, same bullet you want to shoot, drop it down in the end there, and this has a thumb screw that you loosen, and this will go up inside the chamber. And then you just push that plastic rod until the bullet hits the lands. Now when you're comfortable with how it feels to you, you just lock the thumb screw down and pull it all back out. And sometimes this will, depending on how much pressure you put on it to hit the lands, especially on the bigger cartridges, this will stick in the bore. And all I do is this is all out, and I just take the rifle and stand it on its butt and just tap it on the floor real quick, and usually the bullet just falls out. Now, I like to take 4 or 5 measurements and write them down until I get an average, and it'll help you develop a feel for how you put the tool in there and put the bullet up inside the bore. It doesn't really matter how you do it, as long as you do it consistently and you can repeat it later on. So, keep good notes, write down how much pressure you put on it or whatever. And it'll help you later on because you're going to want to keep track of your throat wear simply so that you can get a good consistent seating depth 300, 400, or 500 rounds down the road. Okay, I've measured the throat on my Canyon rifle. It hasn't moved at all. I'm at 3.174, which is where it was 250 rounds ago, so I'm not going to mess with it at all. My seating depth isn't going to change from my last batch of ammo that I loaded for it. So I'm going to seat these at 3.164 to jump 10 thousandths to the lands. It's been pretty good with these Match Kings. I've had very consistent accuracy with them. Very low ES. It's just been a really good load for me. So I'll start loading a couple here and show you how it goes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about bullets. This is a 300 grain 338 caliber Sierra Match King bullet. It's an open tip match. hollow point bullet. The tip of it's called the nose or the tip. Then the slope portion here is the ogive, and then where the ogive hits the bearing surface is the kind of a shoulder junction. Then you have the bearing surface, that's the part that actually rides the lands when it's shot. And then at the back of it you have the heel, and it's a boat tail bullet, so it has this sloped heel. Now, the reason we measure at the ogive, which is what we're doing when we use the comparator and the insert, is the junction of the ogive and the bearing surface is where the bullet's first going to contact the lands when it gets shot. So that's the number that we're most concerned with, because the amount of jump, or the amount of, if you do it this way, if you want to jam it in the lands when you shoot it, the amount of jam or the jump will directly affect your accuracy, your precision, your consistency, your velocity, and your extreme spread in your velocity. So we want to keep that number as exact as we can, and we need to keep track of it so that we can duplicate the jump further down the road when our barrel, the throat starts to wear on the barrel. So that's why we measure it there, because this portion of the bullet where the ogive and the bearing surface meet is very consistent. We can set up our tooling, we can set up our measuring tools to measure it exactly at that point, and it'll be the same on every bullet. Now, if you measure off the tip to the end of the case, you have the risk of getting an inconsistent piece of jacket there on the tip from bullet to bullet that could show you 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, whatever difference from round to round, and it'll drive you crazy trying to seat your bullets. So the ogive is the best place to do it, right where the ogive and the bearing surface meets. It's very easy to do once you understand how, and that's how we do it for our consistency. Okay, this is what it looks like when you're doing the measurement on checking your seating depth coming out of the die. Basically, you've got the anvil of your caliper here, then you have the comparator body and the insert, the 3.3 insert. I've already checked the throat wear on the Canyon rifle. Everything looks good. It hasn't burned at all in 250 rounds, so I'm still jumping 10 thousandths, so my load's going to be, my seating depth, my max seating depth on the Canyon rifle for contacting the lands with the Sierra Match King is 3.174, so I'm going to seat them 10 thousandths off because I've had really good luck with these bullets that way, so I'm going to seat them at 3.164. And once I get this all locked down, I'll check every one of them just to be safe, but with the profile on the Sierra Match King and the seating stem here in the competition seating die, I just haven't had any problems, so it's off to the races. Okay, when I'm seating, I like to be very smooth about it and do it exactly the same way every time, with the same velocity, same force, and the same pause at the top. There's some elasticity to the brass that you're loading, so I like to take out any factors of going fast, going hard, or anything like that, to just make sure that I'm getting the same amount of pressure on my stroke through the die and giving it time to hit all the way to where it's going to stop every single time. So I don't know if it's that big of a deal, but one of the things that I really, really believe in with hand loading or long range shooting or anything like that that requires a lot of precision is that consistency is almost as important as technique. So however you do it, I think you're always safe to be consistent about it. In other words, do it exactly the same way every time. So I'll just pull the round off the loading block here, put it in the shell holder, grab a bullet, start it up in the die, and then once it gets into that sleeve, it's all supported. I don't have to worry about anything else anymore, and I'll come down nice and slow, and I can feel the spring in the die, and I'll hit the bottom, and I'll give it about a 1 second pause, and then pull it back out. Now, this should be 3.164, so let's see what we end up with. So I have 3.164. Consistency, that's the biggest thing. Now on the Canyon rifle, on this 338 Edge plus P ammo, I check the seating depth of every round that I load, simply because it's so important to keep that seating depth consistent for your pressure and your velocities. I hold these to a 5/10 thousandths tolerance to the seating depth that I'm going for, and it's really helped me, I think, to get single-digit extreme spread in my velocities, and that's important when you're starting to reach out quite a ways. If you just look in your program, in your ballistic program, and fiddle with the velocity numbers and start changing your velocity, say you're running some velocities and you have a 20 or 30 foot per second spread, that might not make any difference at all at 5 or 6 or 700 yards. But if you start plugging those numbers in and change your velocity up or down by 20 or 30 feet a second and see what the correction value difference is at, say, 1,200, 1,500, 1,700 yards, it starts to add up quite a bit. And a half minute at 1,200 yards is 6 inches, and that's 6 inches of vertical dispersion that you don't have to give up if you get low extreme spreads. So that's something to think about if you're shooting a rifle that you're only going to shoot out to 400 or 500 yards. You don't need to be this picky. You might get it for free, and that's always a good thing. More consistency never hurt anybody. But you can run a pretty high ES, say a 20 to 30 foot per second ES, and still have some amazing accuracy at 100, 200, 300, 400. So, this might not be for everybody, but if you can get it without a lot of effort, it can't hurt. So anyway, that's why I'm very picky about my Canyon rifle ammo, simply because it's a purpose-built rifle that its job is to go out and do the things that normal rounds can't do. So that's what I like to do. Okay, that's it. I'm at the end of it now. I've got everything written down in my notebook so I can go back and duplicate my load 6-8 months down the road if I need to. Keep everything in these hard plastic boxes. On the inside of the lid here, I've got a card taped to it that has the date, what the load is, what the seating depth is, any special notes I might have to think about with this ammo. The next step is going to be shoot several rounds over at magneto speed. Make sure my velocity is where it is, where it's supposed to be. From the last batch, I'll check extreme spreads and make sure it's nice and low, single digits, and then I'll take it and I'll shoot it on a plate 700 or 800 yards away and make sure it holds a nice small group, half minute or less, right in the center of the plate, and I'm off to the races. So I'm going to go do some spring bear hunting. Thanks for watching. See you next time.